The watch industry has actually been lying to us for decades. And the wild part is, a lot of people actually thank them for it. Or just as bad, they didn't notice, or they didn't even care. You see, many brands have tried to force us to believe that luxury is synonymous with meaning. They love the watch debates that argue that quartz is inferior, even if these same brands are making quartz watches behind the scenes. They made us believe that the more that you spend, the more that a watch is worth. But here's the truth that real collectors have figured out. A watch doesn't tell you who you are. It might tell you a little bit about what you value. Now, if you're willing to look past the marketing, I'm gonna show you the lie that they built and the truth that's actually gonna set you free from it. So if you're interested, let's unwind time together. Now, before we break down this lie, there's something that you have to do first.
Subscribe.
But in all seriousness, thank you. Because what I've realized is that less than 10% of the people who watch the video are actually subscribed. So to the 10% of you, I appreciate it. But let's get into the video. To understand why the myth stuck, we need to start with the language that the industry uses, because the fog begins with the words. Now, let's talk about Swiss made, Swiss movement, and cost clarity, so that we can open up this fog. Let's take Swiss made, for instance. Most people think that it guarantees a fully Swiss watch. Every screw, every gear, every surface crafted in some quiet Alpine workshop. Alpine? I don't know, whatever. But behind the curtain, Swiss made doesn't mean fully Swiss. It's actually not even close. By law, a watch can use the Swiss label if 60% of the movement's value is Swiss, the final movement is cased up in Switzerland, final inspection happens on Swiss soil. That means that parts can come from anywhere. China, Japan, Korea, North Korea. The cases, the dials, the hands, the crystals, the bracelet, they can all be sourced globally. And as long as the movement hits value threshold, and value is really a relative and flexible word, the watch can earn the Swiss stamp. It's not deception. It's just not the story that marketing tells. Then there's Swiss movement. I know it sounds pure, it sounds elite, but the truth is, Swiss movement can mean the movement was assembled in Switzerland. That's it. Or that only some of the components were Swiss. Or that the unfinished parts were just shipped to Switzerland to be finished there. And suddenly it's qualified as Swiss. See, it's a term that means something, and honestly, it means nothing. It just depending on who uses it. Now, here's one that I think is gonna make a lot of watch collectors upset. Let's talk about COSC certifications. You see, when people hear chronometer certified, they picture an independent agency pulling watches off the shelves at random. See, this isn't like the NASA testing, and this isn't like everything in the JD Power survey. COSC is totally different, and it doesn't work that way. You see, brands actually have to pay to submit their movements, and actually not all of them, but just the ones that they choose. Those specific movements go through positional and temperature tests, and if they pass, they get certificates. And if they fail, they simply don't come back with paperwork. See, there's no scandal, there's no public list, there's no shame. COSC isn't something that I'm gonna say is corrupted. It's not manipulation, and it's not even a bad thing. It's just not the consumer watchdog that most people imagine. It's a benchmark that you choose to participate in, and not one that chooses you. And by you, we're referring to the brands here. And this is where marketing steps in. Marketing takes this technically true, but it wraps it in this sense of prestige, and it lets consumer imagine the rest. Marketing turned clarity into a type of fog. And fog in the industry is honestly profitable because the fog lets brands sell exclusivity. Fog lets them sell heritage. It lets them sell this Swissness, even when the picture is far more global than the slogan. And none of this makes a watch bad. It just means that the story is more complicated. So then the question becomes, what are you actually chasing when you chase a watch? Is it the craft or the feeling that the ad promised? Now, let's take it a little bit deeper. Let's talk about some of the history and the lies that are old. To understand why the myth stuck, you have to understand where they come from. And the truth is, these myths weren't born from arrogance. They were born, honestly, from a sense of survival. Switzerland's national treasure from the 1800s to the early 1900s, which is really over a century, treated watchmaking like a national treasure. It was not a hobby, it was a heritage. It had strict export rules, trade protection, labeling laws about what could be called Swiss, and thousands of tiny workshops spread across the Jura Mountains. These were families, craftsmen, farmers turning gears into winter months. The country built a wall around its craft. and the world bought into this idea of slow, deliberate, hand-finished precision. But this way was only the beginning. You see, because America actually began to disrupt the Swiss, particularly around the mid-1800s to 1920s. Now, here's what most collectors don't realize. The Swiss didn't invent industrial watchmaking. America did. Waltman, Eglin, factories with interchangeable parts, gauges, and assembly lines. And at this time, Waterbury, Connecticut was one of the places that was really the Switzerland of America. Also the home of Timex. This precision shocked the Swiss so much that delegations traveled to the US in the 1870s to study our methods. They took notes, they studied machines, they copied gauges, and they brought these ideas home. And that tells you something powerful. The Swiss were already losing ground, not in the 1970s, but a century earlier. So they leaned into one thing that America couldn't mass produce, and that's heritage. And this is where the myth begins. We have to talk about the quartz crisis because it hit like an asteroid in the 1970s, particularly in 1969. This is when Seiko released the quartz Astrotron, and the world changed overnight. See, quartz was a revolution. It was 100 times more accurate, but it was also cheaper. It was more durable, it was more reliable, and it almost had no maintenance. The Japanese didn't just innovate, they obliterated the measuring stick that the Swiss had used for over a century. By the mid-1980s, the Swiss exports had absolutely collapsed. Half the industry's jobs had vanished. Dozens of brands died, and the country started into possibly to fear what watchmaking would become. What would it be? You see, for so long it had been their identity, and they were afraid that it might not survive. Can you put yourself in the Swiss's shoes for a minute? Imagine waking up and realizing that the craft that your grandfather taught you no longer had a place in the world. See, this wasn't just competition. It had the potential to be extinction. And when you start hearing down extinction, you have to pivot. You see, the Swiss learned that they couldn't win on accuracy anymore. Japan owned that space. So the industry changed the story. They reframed mechanical watches as something quartz could never be. They didn't want to focus on precision. They wanted to be more poetic. Not functional, but faithful. Not efficient, but eternal. They went from engineering to a sense of artistry. And they didn't just focus on their watches being tools, but they wanted them to become treasures. Mechanical watches weren't obsolete yet. They wanted to focus more on their meaning and say that quartz wasn't really advanced, it was soulless. People, and they tried desperately to embrace this story wholeheartedly. Now, the schema, the paradigm had shifted, and suddenly owning a mechanical watch wasn't about timekeeping. It slowly became a part about identity. And with that shift, Switzerland didn't just recover, they rose higher than ever. So let's walk through some of these big myths. Myth number one, a watch is a status symbol, and most people outside the hobby can't tell the difference between an Invicta and an IWC. See, a watch doesn't display status. It actually displays some assumptions for others. There's another myth that we have to address, and that scarcity equals value. Scarcity once meant craftsmanship, but today, limited editions, boutique exclusives are often just sales tools. And the other myth that we have to talk about, a nice watch makes you better. And it doesn't. It never has, and it never will. Character can't be for sale, and confidence isn't measured in millimeters or joules. To everyone who's ever worn a watch purely because it made them smile, you're already ahead of the game. So now that we've tore it down, I think it's important that we also still have to rebuild it up and highlight some of the truths that transcend. Because while the industry did this purposely, I don't think they did it maliciously. It lied because it was easier to sell identity than it was to sell intimacy. Because it's easier to sell aspiration than honesty a lot of the time. And it's much easier to sell exclusivity than it is to sell meaning. But meaning doesn't live in boutique windows. Meaning doesn't have to come from heritage charts or chronometer papers. Meaning comes from the wrist, not from the brochure. We were never supposed to find our worth in objects. That's not watches, that's not cars, not anything made with human hands. Worth comes from a much deeper place, a steadier place. When we take a look at the industry today, after all of these years, it still has lots of problems. Hype is still running hot. Marketing is still rewarding insecurity and exclusivity. And comparison still sneaks up on us. And I'm not pretending that I'm above any of it. We're all human. We all want to feel seen. We all get swept up into it sometimes. But what matters more is actually being aware. Because if you're aware of the lies, if you're aware of the myths, awareness in itself is a type of freedom. And freedom is clarity. So to me, the watches aren't the lies. It's the marketing that is. And we just have to understand that. A watch is a companion. It's a witness and a reminder that our time is limited. And with that limited time, I thank you so much for spending with me. You could have been anywhere in the world and you chose to spend it watching this video. And if you have some time, I would love for you to watch one of these other videos here, or maybe leave a comment of what video you want to see next. But regardless, for everything there's a season, and for every watch a story. Thanks for being a part of mine. God bless and peace.